These are the conversations that dog men have, but nobody wants to put in podcast form. The conversations are unfiltered, and we are not measuring every word. Shooting straight from the hip and totally opinionated. Welcome to Raw Dog.
Not saying a damn thing. Oh. This is going to be one of those short ones if neither one of us are going to say anything.
Well, I mean, I wasn't going to say anything before. I still ain't feeling real great.
Do what?
I said I still ain't feeling real great. A little under the weather. What's
wrong with you? Last time I talked to you, you were chasing women, and now you're saying you're not feeling great.
No, I wasn't chasing women. Well, sometimes you can do that even if you don't feel great.
Yep.
No, I was just driving home. I think I've got something going on. I'm not sure. It's like a headache. I'm tired. My stomach's a little bit uneasy.
It's summertime.
Yeah,
I always start feeling like crap in the summer. I do. We're coming into the months that I hate the most. June, July, and August. Get a lot of stuff done, and I do get a lot of stuff done around the place and things like that, but hot weather and me, nah. I hate it.
Just starting to heat up here. Like last Saturday was kind of our first good hot day. Today was pretty hot. But I mean, you're in Indiana. What's your July, mid-July, what's your temperatures like?
We were at 90 today.
Oh, that's hotter than us.
Yeah, 90 and 75% humidity today.
Yeah, that's probably hotter than us. But we've been this has been like the wettest spring.
We've been getting hammered.
So our humidity, our humidity is up higher than it usually is this time of year, which I don't even like to complain about humidity because them dudes in Louisiana and South Texas, like that is humidity like you can't even imagine.
It's unbelievable.
We don't get it like that, but it's still bad enough.
I think like the times I've been down in Louisiana hog hunting, even in February, you walk out in the morning, you feel like you got to swim to the truck, and I think it's got to be, I've heard the term, I don't know what it means, but relative humidity. I don't know what
that means.
But I'm telling you, humidity in Louisiana for me is completely different. I think it's because there's so much water down there and there's so much water in the ground and the sun's beating on it. It's bringing it right up past you. 90% humidity in Indiana isn't anything like 90% humidity in Louisiana. I can tell you that.
Oh, if they've just got 90%, they think it's springtime.
Yeah.
Which is funny because like around here, I'm in Northeast Oklahoma. So in the 1950s and 1960s, they started damming up a bunch of rivers to make hydropower, and in the process, they made a bunch of lakes.
And taking Uncle John's farm.
Yeah. Well, John's the one that told me this. So before they started making all these lakes, most of our lakes are man-made. John said that we had almost no humidity. And he swore that all those lakes, those large bodies of water standing there, putting water into the air, he said he remembered before that the humidity in Oklahoma wasn't near as bad, which it makes sense. It's one thing you would probably never think about.
There's a reason why deserts have low humidity. There ain't any water there.
Yeah, there's no water in the air.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm with you. I hate this time of year. Like I went, I think it was 2 Saturdays ago, I went to a coon hunting clubhouse and they were all going out on hunts, and a couple people were like, "Oh man, come on." I said, "No, I'm going to sit right here in this air conditioned building and I'll be here when you guys show back up at 2 a.m. sopping wet, covered with ticks." And it's just hard to get motivated to go out there in them woods this time of year.
Oh, yeah. I used to be hard at it, man. I did. I mean, if it was dark, I was hunting.
Yeah.
And I admit it, I've slowed down. Maybe got smarter, and maybe because I'm not running for some truck ticket or something like that anymore. It's not that I miss. It's not that I miss it. I passed up a lot of stuff when I was younger, to hunt, and that includes stuff that needed to be done at home, both emotionally and actual work that needed to be done around here.
Yeah, I get you. Like I hunted with a guy, an old retired guy, when I was younger and had younger kids, and I missed a lot because of that. But it was because he was nagging me. Come on, let's go.
Yeah.
Now in the summertime, Tanner will call me and he'd be like, "You want to go tomorrow night?" And I'm like, not really. And he's like, I don't really want to go. I don't really want to go either, but we got to get these dogs out there. And it's like, yeah, let's go do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Y'all have a lot of snakes up there?
No, our snake population we have snakes, but in 30 years of living here, I've never seen any kind of poisonous snake. Now, you go to central Indiana, or if you go just across the river down into Kentucky, you get half an hour south, then you start getting into copperhead and timber rattler stuff. But south central, just west of me here, then we've got timber rattlers and copperheads.
Copperheads are a big snake here, but like really when we're hog hunting, so actually hogs are kind of easier to pattern in the summertime, and that's kind of like the double-edged sword. Like we have a better idea where pigs are going to be in the summertime because they're going to be right near water.
Yeah.
Most of the time, not always, but most of the time. And we got a pretty good population of copperheads and rattlesnakes, but they don't even really, they're not the bad ones. It's them water moccasins that hang out near the water. That copperhead and a rattlesnake, they'll bite you, but it's usually out of fear. You surprise them, step on their tail.
Yeah.
But something about them cottonmouths, when they get, especially in the summer, they just get this attitude and they will like literally like chase you down. Like they're not just biting out of fear. They're like biting out of
just mean.
Yeah,
they're just mean. I saw a study. I saw a study today. This guy took a prosthetic leg, put a boot on it, probably a leg from a mannequin or something like that. And he put it on a stick, and he put a boot on it and pants on it. And he would go out and he'd find a rattlesnake, and he would step on it with that fake leg. Out of 175 snakes, only 6 of them bit. Yeah. The rest of them were just trying to get away.
Yeah, they really do just want to get away for the most part. And like I got buddies who wear snake boots, and oh my goodness, like I probably should, but when it's that hot, the last thing I want to do is lace up some hot boots all the way up to my knee. And knock on wood, I've never been bit.
Well, the guys up here will wear those, and I did too. I mean, you wear rubber boots and frog legs all summer long, and talk about hot. That's crazy. I used to wear shorts. I had a pair of, military, the military camouflage pants. We call them fatigues. But I had those cut off, and it was a little bit cooler. But one of the things I found that I really liked wearing was those chaps, those mule wear chaps.
Yeah.
Mule brand. Their summer chap. It's vented all the way down the back with this heavy duty mesh. And it was really cool. You could actually wear those with shorts and through some of the thickest, nastiest stuff that I could throw at them and didn't have any problems.
Yeah, I know some guys who do that. I just could never take rubber boots. Like I would rather, they're just so damn uncomfortable. Like I would rather, and sometimes I do wear rubber boots, but it seems like every time I wear them, I remember why I don't wear them. Because at least hog hunting, like if we're getting in any real water, we're going over the top of them boots. And then you just got water in your boots that's trapped and can't get out. So like I usually just wear leather boots and have wet feet. I'd rather have wet feet than wear rubber boots all night. Because they usually don't, like I said, they usually don't even keep me dry.
Well, summertime, it's useless. Some of the hardest hunting guys I know back in the day wore tennis shoes in the summertime. I mean, I did. When I was a kid, I couldn't afford rubber boots, and you didn't want to wear them out in the summer. So we hunted in tennis shoes and stuff. And
back then, rubber boots were, I mean, I'm complaining about rubber boots being uncomfortable today. Back then, rubber boots were really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
They make some today. I don't want to pay what they want, but they make some today that are fairly comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but you're right. And then I haven't worn a cotton sock in probably 25 years easy.
Really?
Oh, no.
Wool or what?
Yeah, the Marine Corps broke me of wearing cotton socks.
You wear wool?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, merino wool sock. Thin.
I wear wool in the winter, but I never worn wool in the summer.
You'll never know the difference. Your feet actually stay drier. You ever get that swamp foot feeling and stuff like that?
Oh, yeah.
But like back when muck boots first started coming out, they had that neoprene liner on the inside.
Yeah.
And then somebody came up with that idea to wear Bama socks. Man, I never wore it. And the reason they did that is because you would wear out that neoprene liner.
Yeah.
And then eventually you'd get a blister. But if you just wear a wool sock, and I'm not talking about the big thermal wool sock. Our socks in the Marine Corps were cushion, sole cushion, heel in the top, and the arch over the top of your foot and up the leg were pretty thin. And if you kept your socks changed, you didn't have blisters. We never worried about blisters. The only time anybody got blisters is when that pussy got out of boot camp and he could make a choice and he started wearing cotton socks again. You go on a big long freaking road hump with all your combat outload, and this guy'd be over there and he'd just be pouring the blood out of his boots because he's like wearing cotton socks, idiot.
I guess I don't have any thin wool socks. I just got big, thick winter socks.
Yeah, I love them. And I'll tell you another one that I just tried, and I tried it on a whim. I was seeing all these advertisements for these alpaca socks.
Yeah.
And I ordered a pair of those. I actually ordered a couple pair of them, and I've been impressed. They're nice.
It's pretty much wool. Pretty much wool, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. But it's that cotton just retains moisture, and then moisture and heat against the inside of a boot equals friction, and then the friction equals blisters.
Yeah, I don't usually have a problem with blisters, but
yeah. Yeah. Well, your boots kind of look like the boots you were wearing bear hunting. Look like you stole them off a hobo on the way out to New Mexico. You're like doing the real Ben Lilly type.
I bought a new pair of boots.
Since then?
Yeah.
You'll have them broke in by the time we go back.
Yeah, they're broken now. I just always go back to those. I like Thorogood. They're made in the United States, and I'm pretty tough on a pair of boots, and they usually last me 3 years in pretty good condition. But they're that wedge sole, which is terrible to hunt in, but they're comfortable. And I don't know. I just always go back to that Thorogood. I'm sure there's better ones out there. And I just can't get into I know there's better boots that are like synthetic and kind of, they got like a rubber toe and, but I just can't. A boot is supposed to be leather.
Yeah.
Even if it is less comfortable. I mean, you look at what them old guys wore. Oh my goodness!
They wore brogans
with a leather sole. There was they didn't have any insoles, and
they'd put horseshoe nails, or they'd put tacks in their soles so they could, they weren't sliding around all over the place. And
yeah, and that's kind of one of them things. I think we hit on it at one point, but I know me and you have talked about it in blacksmith kind of stuff, but them old guys would take advantage. If they were here today, if they teleported into 2024, they would totally take advantage of the technology that we've got, you know, tracking dogs and with the clothing that we got.
Oh, yeah.
The boots that we got.
That conversation came up a lot. There's a bunch of snobs in the, and I'm not going to, we joke around when we say snobs, but when we were doing all that historical flintlock hunting, and it's called historical trekking, and you pack in someplace, you'd have like all your gear had to be juried. You couldn't have anything modern.
Yeah.
No plastic, no Ziploc bags, no nothing. It had to be period correct to pre-1800 was what we were shooting for. You know, medication, stuff like that. That was obviously an exemption, but everything else needed to be period correct. And the argument always was, well, if Daniel Boone could have got his hands on it, he would have used it. It's like, well, yeah, but that's not what we're trying to. It's not what we're trying to accomplish. So yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I mean, there's still rendezvous and stuff. I don't think they're as popular as they were, like going back to 1990s.
Oh,
but
man.
Yeah, you know, they'll set it up and it'll be if you're going to get, and it'll be like a pre-1870 rendezvous or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, when you're coming in, if the buttons on your coat are post 1870, like, you can't come in.
Sorry.
Which is kind of cool. I mean, that's not my scene at all. Like,
I ran with some of those people, but you had a lot of people that were we call them thread counters.
Yeah.
You know, how many threads per, how many stitches per inch. And if you don't have some sort of standard in that kind of stuff, then you got all kinds of, we call the other guys, the other end of the spectrum, we call them Tandy buckskinners.
Yeah.
You know, they got all their leather from Tandy's and had big long fringe hanging off their pants and shirts and doing all this other stuff and kept their coolers hidden. And
but I think a lot of that, and like I say, that's not my scene, so I'm not an expert, but I think a lot of that rendezvous scene is kind of turned like way more commercial. Like, it's just like a bunch of vendors, you know.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem to have the same feel that it had 20 or 30 years ago.
Yeah. It's definitely a different crowd for sure. Most of the people that it's like a big costume party for a lot of them. They've got, this is the thing that always cracked me up about it. It's like, we're trying to recreate this setting that would depict the early 17th, 18th century and early 19th century. That's what we're trying to recreate. And yet you had people show up for a week-long event, and the women had these extravagant dresses, and they wore a different one in the morning than they wore in the evening, and all the guys had 40 different outfits, and they had stoves in their tents, and I mean, there were some marquees that were set up as plush as a bedroom as you would ever want to see. Handmade beds and all this other stuff. It's like, there ain't anybody in their right mind that the only people that did that were very few wealthy type people, but everybody wanted to be like that. They all wanted the comforts. And so I got to the point, like at Friendship, I would park my truck and carry every bit of my gear. If I couldn't carry it in on one trip, then I wasn't being authentic. It wasn't an authentic recreation of what would happen. Yeah. Rifle, shot pouch, all the cleaning gear for my rifle, everything I had was it, and my bedroll and everything went in with me.
They used to have one here. I mean, probably just like 30 minutes from the house at Fort Gibson, which is the oldest fort in Oklahoma. I can't remember the dates on it, but it's really early. So they would have a rendezvous there every year, and it was kind of set up kind of set up for spectators in a sense, but it was kind of leaned toward like the Confederate side. It was kind of set in Civil War days.
Yeah.
But, and Oklahoma wasn't a state in the Civil War, but we kind of leaned Confederate. So it was kind of set up on the Confederate side. So me and this friend of mine, James Murray.
Oklahoma wasn't a Confederate state. It was where everybody went to dodge the draft and get out of the war.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about that. That's what I was saying. We weren't a state, so we weren't technically either side.
I'm going to the Indian territories.
But I will say that Oklahoma had the last Confederate general to surrender.
Well, didn't Josie Whale fled to the Indian territories, which would have been Oklahoma? He would have been in Oklahoma.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, it was like everywhere. Like we had Indian tribes that owned slaves. Most of the Indian tribes owned slaves, and they were Confederate. But like I say, and I can't remember his name. I think it was a shade that he was the last Confederate general to surrender. But anyway, so going back to this rendezvous. So they would have it, and this friend of mine, James Murray, he's kind of in the same mindset I was in, and we never did it. I wish we would have done it. But we were always like, man, let's pack up our mules and let's not go to the rendezvous.
Let's ride to it.
Well, we were going to set up outside of it because he and I were both big fans of Quantrill.
Yeah.
Quantrill and the Raiders.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what they would do. So Quantrill and his men, and that's a totally huge subject, but they were quote Confederate, but they were really just in it for what they could rape and pillage. But they would kind of follow the Confederate troops around, but they, since they weren't Confederate troops, they weren't allowed to set up camp with them, but they would set up camp right outside.
Yeah, the Confederates did not want the culpability and the bad rap of Quantrill. They were guerrillas. No,
but they would reap.
They wouldn't oppose them.
Yeah, they would reap the chaos that they.
You better believe it.
So we were like, man, let's go set up like just outside of Fort Gibson. And I was like, we'll just get rip roaring drunk. And I mean, who knows, maybe 2:00 in the morning, we decide to saddle up and just like ride through
the camp.
Screaming. We never did it. We should have done it.
It goes back to the enemy, my enemy is still my friend. That philosophy is what Quantrill's relationship was with the Confederates.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
I'm a big fan of Quantrill. And actually some of my family, I shouldn't even go there.
Yeah, we won't. Let's not. We'll save it. We'll save it.
So what are we going to talk about?
You didn't want to know. I thought we're already talking about it.
Well, we're already in it, so now I can know.
Yeah. No, so see, Ed and I decided that when we decide we're going to talk about something, that the conversation is too stifled. So we decided not to. I'll tell you what, you've given me a real good segue into, you and I both, we glorify the old days. We talk about when we get together, we like doing stuff the old way. And we just had a whole discussion about 18th century living and Quantrill and all that stuff. But I heard this thing today. We all talk about wanting to be in the old days, but the old days weren't necessarily the good old days. I heard this thing on Rogan today, and they were talking about, and they verified it, but back in medieval England, I don't know how far you got to go back to. Maybe medieval Europe wasn't the good old days. Maybe the good old days didn't happen until later, but
I think it probably was a little bit later.
The sanitation laws in Europe in medieval times, I think it's England, is one of the sanitation laws was you had to announce 3 times, look out below, look out below, look out below, before you entered a full chamber pot out into the streets.
Yeah.
That's not good.
No, I mean, it was a cesspool of.
Can you imagine?
Disease. In America, when America first, when the settlers first came over here, it wasn't much different. It was better. It was better in the sense that we weren't so confined. The
Puritans advised against bathing. They discouraged bathing because it led to temptation.
Okay, maybe I'm Puritan. I'm not real big on bathe. I think people bathe too much.
But think about it.
There's guys out there today, not even girls. There's dudes out there who are taking 2 and 3 showers a day.
All right, I got to ask you this because I got to ask you. It seems to me that is. I've noticed, I've got friends from all over, but I've noticed that my friends from the South, and especially from Appalachian, that region right there, it's like every day, at least once a day. It's like, hey, the bathroom's right. If I go stay somewhere, it's like, hey, the shower's right there. And I almost feel obligated to take a shower, even though if I just rode in a truck, I showered in the morning. And I rode in the truck all day to get where I'm going.
That's like peer pressure.
Yeah. I almost feel obligated before they put me up for the night to take a shower because I don't want to soil the bed. But is that kind of a Southern thing where people lived in a press lot? I think about stupid stuff like this all the time, and I wonder if it's a deal where. My grandpa didn't get to take a bath but once a month. And so now I can. And my grandma told me I need to take a bath every day. Or my great grandpa. Is that a carryover, do you think?
I don't know. I mean, part of it might go back to that humidity.
Yeah.
I bathe once every 3 or 4 days. I've gone a lot further than that. Like, we'll go to Uncle Earl's, and it's a week, and people are like, oh my goodness, I just can't wait to get home and take a shower. And it's like, that never even crossed my mind. But it's kind of a weird topic. But
no, I think it's fitting.
So
it's raw dog, man.
Okay, so people have a smell. And we associate any human smell with just being like nasty.
Yeah.
But so like if you bathe every day or 2 times every day or 3 times every day, like you're washing away what they call your like pheromones. So like you've met somebody and just a total stranger, and then right off the bat, man or woman, you've met him and thought like, I like this dude. We don't really understand it, but a lot of that like inclination to be like, I like this guy or I don't like this guy is based off pheromones, which is a smell that we emit.
Mm-hmm.
So when you bathe, entirely too much, you're not emitting those pheromones.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like I say, this is kind of crazy, but like,
are you attracted to men, Ed?
No, not in the least. But I'm saying like in man and woman relationships, like if you're not really getting the smell of that woman's pheromones, you don't really know if you like them or not.
It's subliminal.
It is. It's like it's an animal.
Absolutely. It's
subliminal.
Deeply entrenched in our genetic makeup.
Yeah, we don't understand it. And there has to be some kind of science behind it. Be it like what that person eats might jive with what you eat. I mean, I'm sure it goes deeper than that.
Have you ever, at the risk of being a married man bringing this topic up, but certain times when you're sitting in a crowded room, a restaurant or whatever, and a woman walks by you, you don't even have to see her. I could be sitting here facing you like this, and she could walk behind me, and it's like I'm winning. You know, it's it's like, what was that? And you look around, it's like, whoa, I know what that was. That's
pheromone. That's pheromone.
That's the pheromone thing. And I think it plays in huge with our wives or the people that we choose to be our lifelong partners, and that isn't just limited to wives. It also, I think people, like you said, people in general choose who their friends are and different stuff based on that.
It's a big part of it, I think.
I think so.
Like, I don't understand it. I don't know if anybody really understands it. But, so, when I stink, and I generally don't, and I've asked a lot of people that are totally honest with me, like, do I stink?
I never noticed it. And I was there towards the end of the week.
Yeah. Well, so, and I can smell myself sometimes.
Yeah. I've been working in the garden and staining a deck out in the 90-degree heat all day. I can smell it.
When I stink the worst is about 12 hours after I shower. So like if I shower, I go through like a phase where I'm clean and then I start to stink. And then if I don't bathe, then that stink goes away for a certain amount of time. And it's because there's good bacteria, bad bacteria. So when you bathe, you wash away all bacteria, in theory. And for whatever reason, it seems like the bad bacteria is what makes you stink.
Mm-hmm.
It goes back to, dogs chasing game. They're chasing bacteria, the smell of bacteria.
I got a couple things to add, and I hope I don't forget any of them. Go ahead. But I don't want to forget them. So
after about 2 days, maybe it might not even take that long, maybe like 36 hours, then the good bacteria gets a foothold and I don't stink.
You don't do anything? You don't no canteen bath, no nothing for a full week?
Well, no, like I say, I take a bath every 3 or 4 days.
No, I mean at Earl's.
Oh no, I don't even do it like a horse bath or anything.
Really?
And I don't wear deodorant. I'm anti-deodorant. Like deodorant, a lot of the deodorant, I mean, you can get organic and all that. It doesn't work. But if you just go by regular deodorant, a big part of that is aluminum.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been quite a few studies that link that aluminum to Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
And that's not the reason why I don't use deodorant. I just don't use deodorant. Like, I bathe, I'm going to stink for 12 or 15 hours after I bathe, and then after that, I'm good.
So, there's a couple things. One is, you say after 36 hours, it's because only a small percentage of the human brain is dedicated to olfactory sense. And we become bored with smelling things. It's like when my wife lights a candle in the house. She makes soy candles, and I'll walk in, it'll smell like a freaking candle emporium sometimes. But after I'm in there for 15 or 20 minutes, my mind actually gets bored of smelling that. And we say we get used to the smell. So our mind actually gets bored with that sort of stuff. Whereas dogs, with 80% of their brain dedicated to their olfactory sense and their ability to scent, they never get tired of it. They smell it all the time. It's just the way it's like us seeing stuff. They see the world through their nose. And so a dog never, but we do. We get bored of it. And I mean, look at the Amish families. If I walk in if I leave here right now and drive over to some folks I know not too far away from here, as soon as I walk in their house, it's like, whoa, y'all need to take some baths. It's been hot today. Yeah. But after I'm there, they live together all the time. And they still have a lot of kids.
Well, it's like we were just talking. I think it was me and my sister talking at work last week. So like chicken, you guys probably don't have many chicken houses up around you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They stink.
Yeah.
I mean, like you can smell a chicken house from 2 miles away.
Yep. Hog confinements are the same way.
So I've known some guys who had chicken houses over the years, and I'd be talking to them, and I'm just like, how do you deal with that smell? They're like, man, like you just get to a point, you know, that they tell me, they're like, you know, you just get to a point where you don't smell it. I'm like, how could you not smell it? Like, it is pungent, like makes your eyes water, but they get used to it.
Yep.
I've always been worried about that. So I've asked people that I really trust, like, hey, smell me. Do I stink? And they're like, no. so
you believe in your theory, but you need to be verified
assured
by some trusted sources. Well, here's a couple hacks for all of you that aren't buying into Ed's hygiene theory. Here's a couple hacks that I've found very effective. And this came from living in the desert and only coming in for, you know, off of patrols and defensive positions, you know, every 2 to 3 weeks to be able to take a shower. You know, we found that bacitracin or Neosporin, triple antibiotic cream, anything with bacitracin in it, will actually help eliminate your body odor because it kills the bacteria that causes. So you take bacit, and we did it for security reasons. You know, the old saying from the Vietnam vets that they could smell the Vietnamese.
Yeah.
And the Vietnamese said they could smell the Americans. It's because we weren't used to that. All the diet and all the other stuff, a very unique smell. Well, Arabs are the same way. You know that. We all know that. You've walked into a 7-Eleven and been like, whoo, what's that smell?
I mean, our smell is from what we eat. So when you use bacitracin or any triple antibiotic ointment in key areas, you can greatly reduce your body odor. Really?
So a lot of times in lieu of deodorant, when we're in the Gila, you know, every morning I got up and I also use those Nature's Way shower towels. They're awesome. It's like a bath in one wipe. And I strongly recommend you start at your head and work your way down. You know, you don't start at the bottom and work your way up. No. That's just a rule of thumb. Just get out there. But those Nature's Way, they're shower towels, and I found them. My wife was having, she's had several medical deals, but times when she couldn't shower for a week. And in the hospital, they were using these shower wipes is what they are. They're like a big wipe, only they're bigger than your standard baby wipe. And I brought some of those home and started using them, and it's like, crap, last time we were in the Gila, I was there a day before you and ended up driving after we were done, I drove up to northern New Mexico to the Paloma, and I sat there for 2 hours with people talking to them, and they never said a word. And I said, hey, I'm going to go take a shower. And I said, it's been a week since I've had a shower. And they're like, really? Well, you better go take a shower if it's been that long, you know. Yeah. But they never knew. They're like, we didn't have any idea. And it's at Nature's Way and the triple antibiotic bacitracin. So we did it in the Marine Corps to reduce our odor so that we couldn't be detected.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'll tell you, like, so it's been 20 years ago or so. So I built my house, and when we first built our house, we didn't have electricity. We're too far back for city water, so we didn't have indoor plumbing. But I built the house. I went ahead and plumbed the house like we would have indoor plumbing. So we had a bathtub, but you couldn't turn on a faucet. And for quite a few years, we hauled our water in. And my kids were little. So we'd fill up, if it was wintertime, we'd heat up water on the wood stove and then fill the bathtub.
Yeah.
Wouldn't fill it, but we'd get a significant amount of water in the bathtub. And then the kids would all bathe. And then the wife would bathe. This is all in the same water. So then after they were done bathing, then I would bathe. But by the time I got to the water, it was already pretty brown. And then I would bathe. And then after I was done bathing, you didn't just pull the plug and dump all that on the ground. We would scoop it back out. And that water went to...
Making coffee.
No, not making coffee. No, not making coffee. But the dogs, the cows, and the mules got that soapy, dirty bath water, and they were more than happy to get it.
Well, back in the day, they say that the man was always the first to bathe, and then it went went in a descending order down to the children, and that's where the saying "Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater" came from.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
We went with an opposite trajectory. Usually because I was the dirtiest. So,
yeah, that's where that saying, supposedly urban legend has it that's where the term "don't throw the baby out with the bathwater" came from. It was a descending order from the head of the household, and we're talking long ago, so nobody send us hate mail or any of that bull crap, but
they should go ahead and send it.
Yeah, please do. Please send us all the hate mail you want. But descending order down to the children at the very end.
That just doesn't make much sense. I mean, because we did it like, okay, the kids should be cleaner.
Why?
Well, it didn't always make sense because lots of times they was out playing in the mud. But I don't know. Maybe it's just our modern sensibilities. We're like, give the kids the cleaner water and give the woman the cleaner water.
So you're saying that they should be. So there was I get it. So you're thinking, well, the baby's not going to be dirty because they've been sitting in a high chair or whatever, and they're not rolling around in it. And then the kids, toddlers though can be freaking grubby.
Oh yeah, they're totally grubby.
Did your wife bathe? And I've seen this. The wife bathed with the baby.
Yeah, when they were little. Yeah.
Yeah. So you kind of.
So when we got electricity, it's kind of a funny story. So we probably didn't have electricity for probably close to 10 years. So one Saturday afternoon, I'm just at the house, normal Saturday, and I hear this truck come in the driveway, which is really out of the ordinary. And it was
when a truck came in your driveway, all the kids went to the window and looked out through the. You saw the
or they were outside playing probably.
Yeah.
But so this truck is coming up, so I walk over to the driveway to look down to who it is, and because we don't get a whole lot of visitors, and it was Lake Region Electrical Co-op. So this guy pulls up, and he gets out, and he kind of has this weird look on his face, and I got three little kids like playing outside, and he goes, "Man, you don't have electricity." I said, no, we don't.
Yeah.
And he just had this dumbfounded look on his face. He's like, "You got to have electricity." And I said, "Well, I ain't got to have it, And he's like, "We got to have you electricity back here." And I said, "Man, I can't afford to have electricity back here." And we talked about it for a bit. And we kind of ended. He was like, "Well, I'm going to go back to the office and figure out, what it costs to get your electricity back here." So he called me that Monday or Tuesday. And I think it was, if my memory's right, it was around 10,000. And I told him, I said, that's not even an option. We're good. We're good the way we are.
Right. So
2 or 3 weeks go by, and it's another Saturday. And I hear someone coming down the driveway again, and it's him. And he's like, "Man, He's like, I just can't get this out of my head. Like, you guys living back here without electricity with these kids. And I was like, it ain't that bad. You know, we've been doing it for 9 years or whatever.
Right.
And he's like, oh my goodness. He's like, I just can't stop thinking about it. He's like, what if we did it for $5,000? And I was like, man, that's I appreciate the offer. That's a great offer, but I can't afford it. You know, it's not even an option. So he leaves, and he called me like on a Friday, a few weeks after that. He said, you going to be out there tomorrow? I said, yeah. He said, I'm going to come over. I said, okay. So I'm in the house, or I was outside, I don't remember. But I heard him coming down the driveway. This is his third trip. And I told my wife, I said, strip them kids down naked and kick them outside. You know, like they need to be outside, covered in dirt, naked. And he come up, and he's like, man, final offer. He's like, and this is crazy. He's like, I'm only going to do this because next week I got linemen that have nothing to do. And he's like, I've already talked over with supervisors, and we will bring you electricity in here at cost. You know, cost of materials and enough to pay the guys. He said, otherwise I'm going to have to send the dudes home next week with nothing to do and they ain't going to make no money. And I said, well, you know, what are we talking about? And he's like, $2,000. And I was like, get her done.
Now you're talking.
But I mean, we literally lived out, you know, like I say, it was close to 10 years, if my memory's right.
I thought you were going to tell me that, like, he'd been fretting over it for the last 3 weeks, took it to the ladies' auxiliary at the local church, and they took up an offering. And it's like, we brought together the funds to get you electricity for nothing.
No, it wasn't that bad. It wasn't that bad. But I mean, it was like, man, it's not quite a half mile. It's a little bit more than a quarter mile, but between a quarter and a half.
I'm 3/10 of a mile off the road here.
Did you bring electricity in?
It was already here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was already here. My house was built in 1859.
Dang.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's a pain in the ass. I mean, it's a struggle at times. We've had to do a lot of improvements and different stuff to if I was by myself, then it wouldn't have been any problem, but it's probably been for the better. That my wife is cold natured and tried to figure out different ways to get viable heat and insulate and stuff like that.
So when we got electricity, it was pretty short after that. We still didn't have a well. So I called the local well drilling company. Now, I mean, this is 20 years ago. From then till now, it's crazy what it costs to drill a well. Crazy what it costs to drill a well. But
today
versus 20 years ago. So we got electricity, and then it was like, okay, now we need to get a well drilled. Like, that will make life crazy more comfortable. So I had one of my great uncles come over to the house who witched wells his whole life. And he witched around, and he found a good vein. And we, threw a marker down where we wanted the well drilled, which is kind of at a weird place. Like, when you look at the house and look at the spot the well is, it's kind of a weird spot. So I called the company and had them come out. The dude come out, before they drill it. And he said, well, where you want to put this? And I said, right here where this marker's at. He said, well, why you want to put it there? Like, it'd be a lot cheaper, to plumb into your house if we put it over here. And I said, oh, I had it witched, and this is where a good vein's at. And he rolled his eyes. He said,
yeah, of course.
You believe that stuff? I said, I sure do.
Yeah.
And he said, well, we'll drill it wherever you want. I was like, we're going to drill it right here. And I said, we should hit water. Yeah, my numbers are probably off. They definitely are off. But I said, we should hit water at 124 feet. because my great uncle could find a vein, but after he found a vein, he would walk that vein and he would get down real low to the ground with his fruit tree limb. It's amazing to watch. He would get it really low.
So he used a forked fruit tree limb. He didn't use two bent coat hangers.
He didn't use a forked fruit tree. He just used a branch off of a fruit tree, and then he would bend it into a L, and then he would hold the short end of the L in his two hands. But he would get really close to the ground, and he would just get super still, and you could watch it. You could watch the tip of that limb bob.
Was it green?
Yeah. It has to be a green limb off of a fruit tree. He used a peach tree. So he crouched down and he's like, okay, count me out to a minute in your head. So I would count out to a minute and he would count the bobs and kind of decipher off of how strong they were. And he would come up with a depth as well as finding the vein. So he told me,
is it like, how do you count out a minute? Did you have to put like one banana or 1,000 or?
Yeah, I mean, I was just counting in my head. And then, when a minute was up, I hollered at him. And then he stood there and kind of cocked his head. And I would imagine did some ciphering in his head. But then he was like, okay, water's at 124 feet. So I told this well driller, I'm like, we ought to hit it at 124. And I'm not sure on the number, but it was right around there. So I told Webster, we're going to hit it about 124. And he said, son, I hope you got a lot more money than that. And I was like, I got enough money however deep you go. And he said, well, I'm telling you right now, we ain't going to hit it till 200. I said, I got plenty of money. Wherever we hit it, we're good. And when I told him I had it witched, he kind of got a look on his face.
Right.
When I told him John Barnes had witched it. And then I said, you know John Barnes? And he kind of looked off to the side. And he goes, yeah, I know that old man. And I said, it doesn't sound like you two get along very well. And he said, no, we don't get along very well at all. So they come out with a truck. They're drilling. And it's a slow process. So I'm building vents or whatever the hell I was doing it. But I kind of kept looking back, and I'd come over every once in a while, how deep are you? Maybe like 78 feet, whatever, and I'd go do what I was doing. Well, I was working around outside, and all of a sudden they hit water. And when they hit water, I'm telling you, like water gushed up that drill stem and covered them dudes in mud and water, and I saw it from a ways off. So I walked over. And when I walked over, he's like, man, this is some good water right here. I was like, how deep are you? And he looked over at his machine. He goes, 128 feet. And I said, man, I'm going to have to call John and give him hell. He was off by 4 feet. I mean, he was on the money.
That is crazy. I always thought it was voodoo type stuff too. And then I've seen guys witch water lines before,
Oh yeah.
Water lines. And
yeah, it's not voodoo. And like my great uncle John told me, cause I always grew up with it being called water witching. And John was a preacher and like a real deep thinker. And he was like, yeah, it's not witching. It's not at all from the devil. Mm-hmm. He's like, it's the opposite. He's like, it's from God. God gave us the tools to survive on this planet. But he taught me a little bit of it, and I'm not a well douser by any means, but an old guy I used to hunt with, we were at his house, and it was like a lot of old houses. I mean, he was on city water, but we were going to drill a well, and he'd already had a well drilled, and we were trying to find old lines to cut them off. We're going to put his house on city water and well water. Mm-hmm. And we didn't know where any of these lines were. So we doused them Lee doused with a coat hanger.
Yeah.
But we doused old existing water lines and amazingly accurate. And I don't understand the science behind that. I don't know if there is any science behind it, but I'm a firm believer it does work.
Well, I think a lot of it just goes back to what your Uncle John said. God equipped us to live on the earth, and they didn't have seismic machines and charts and all that other stuff. John showed me when he was up here witching it. He showed me because I had my place pretty well cleared at that point. But we walked that vein for a long ways from out in the woods back to the house. And then when we got back to the house, he said, turn back around and look where I showed you that vein is. And he's like, all those trees tilt back towards that vein. So where we drilled the well, to this day, you can stand there and look back to the east, and where that vein starts to go off into the woods where I haven't cleared, all those trees kind of cant in a little bit pointing towards that vein. Oh, why do they? Because the root system's pulling them that direction?
I'm not sure.
It has to be. It'd have to be because the root system is pulling them towards the water. There's less roots on the backside, so the tree just naturally leans in that direction. It'd have to be, wouldn't it?
Something like that. But John said you can go out to a place and just kind of, if you stop and look at the trees for a long time, he said without even picking up a dowsing rod, you can kind of have a pretty good idea of where to start just by looking at the trees and the angle that they're coming in at. And it's true.
I don't discount any of it. And it's kind of tough because, I do believe in stuff, and I've spent a lot of time on the Houndsman XP podcast talking about science-based wildlife management, and I don't discount the science. But I think there's a lot of other stuff out there that does get discounted because it's not backed up by some scientific theory, but it's inherently known to us as people. I don't need a scientific study on everything before I make a decision about, like we were talking about pheromones in people beforehand. You don't have the luxury of going back and looking at the scientific data before you decide whether or not you like somebody or not. You know what I mean? There's something inherent about the human ability to do that sort of stuff. Same way with dogs, I feel like it doesn't take me long to figure out whether or not I'm going to get along with a dog.
Oh yeah, it's pretty instant.
Yeah.
So what science do you point back to that? Like
you can't.
You go look at a litter of puppies and you're just drawn to one puppy.
Yep.
You don't know why you're drawn to that puppy. And even better, when the dog seems to have an interest in you and you have an interest in the dog, that always works out.
Yeah. I think you have more invested at that point because you feel like, and that's why I don't just tell people like, yeah, just send me a pup. I think deep down inside, I'm thinking, well, I didn't pick this pup. He probably sent me a call, probably sent me the one he didn't like. So I'm not going to, something deep down inside me is subliminally telling me that this may or may not work out. And yeah, I'm a doubter, but if I pick it and I like it, then I have a better chance of making something out of it.
Yeah, and to be the devil's advocate on that, so if I just tell somebody, yeah, just send me whichever pup you think, or if I go look at a litter and I'm like, oh, this is the one.
Mm-hmm.
Playing the devil's advocate. If I think that's the one, I'm going to put more into that dog. Yep. But, in the cur dog world, so for the most part, curs hunt for their owner. Where like a hound hunts for himself and a cur hunts to please his owner. So in the cur dog world, if you don't really like the dog, you don't particularly get along with the dog, then they almost never turn out.
Yeah.
In the hound world, that might be a little bit different.
I've noticed a difference, from terriers, and I had, not hog dog curs, but I had mountain curs for several years. And if I like them, we get along good. If I don't like them, then they don't. And you can tell if they don't like you. And a lot of it, they're keying off of your own behavior because they already know that you don't like them.
Oh, 100%. 100%. I think it was me and you talked about that, but like I've had cur dogs that I didn't like them. Like they weren't even bad dogs. Like they were pretty decent dogs.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, I just didn't like them. And they cue off of that. And I've had dogs that I liked and they didn't like me, and it didn't work out. I think we don't. And you and I agree on this. Sometimes a dog just needs a new zip code. Yeah. That's what I was getting at. Like I've given them dogs away that like, they were good. There was really nothing wrong with them. It's just like, I just don't like this dude. And I would pass him off to maybe somebody I don't hunt with very often, but I'll be hunting with and I'm like talking shit on the dog the whole time we're hunting. Like, what is your problem? Like, I just don't like this dude. Yeah. I think I'm going to go home and call him. And they're like, no, don't do that. Like, give him to me. And then I talked to him 6 months later and I'm like, oh, I love that dog. Like, he's great. And I'm like, he never would have been great at my house because when I pulled over to the kennels and started loading dogs to go hunt, I didn't even like to load him, so he didn't get that, it kind of goes back to that, where I was playing devil's advocate. Like if I don't like the dog, I can't really give him that much of a,
I won't give him a chance. That's the thing. I've got a blue tick female. Well, I don't have her anymore. There's a little blue tick female that I raised here and I didn't like her. There were tons of stuff that I did like about her. I can't say a ton. There were several things that I saw the potential in the dog, but Casey Stutzman's got her. Casey took her out there and he started her on bears and lions and different stuff like that. And then after Jazz got killed, my Jazz female, she was out of Jazz. I wanted to bring a female back here. The whole deal was he's got Rush and he's got this female he calls Girl. And when Jazz got killed, I was like, well, crap, I'm out of the gene pool now. What am I going to do? And so I called Casey. I said, hey, how's Girl working out? Oh, I like her. She's doing good. But he was straight up with me too. He's like, she's a weird dog. She's real weird. And I don't know if she's going to work for you or not, because she's really kind of, he called it, well, how did he say it? He said it was real uncomfortable for him to talk about. It was like, it's like she's got this perverted bond to me or something, It was strange. And I brought her back here. I said, well, I'll try. He said, yeah, let's split her time. We'll coon hunt her in the summer back there, and I'll bring her back and lion bear hunt her. It's like, okay, let's do it. And got her here. I hated her. I hated her. She would lick your hands, and she was just so needy. And I was just like, I hate this dog. And I told Casey, I was like, I am so surprised you have not called this dog. And I said, do you want me to send her back to you? He goes, yeah, send her back out here. She's doing amazing out there with him. And for what he's using her for, he's sending me pictures. And I think Casey's not the type that would send me something to rub it in my ass,
Yeah.
But I think he's getting a little satisfaction rubbing it in my ass that she's working out good. And I'm glad she's working out, but she wasn't going to work out here.
Yeah. Let's pause for a second.
Yep. While Ed's gone, I can talk about his inability to retain liquid in his bladder. Well, I think that leads into another conversation about culling.
Before we get to that, so that's something totally different. Like we're talking about dogs that I'm not going to say do everything right, but dogs that are good that you just don't click with.
Yeah.
So there's dogs that should be kicked down the road because of a personality conflict, but that's a totally different thing than kicking Culls down the road.
Right.
So
agreed.
When you got a worthless dog, we're not talking about worthless dogs. We're talking about dogs that we don't jive with, but are decent dogs. And those dogs deserve a shot down the road. But that doesn't mean that you just got a totally worthless SOB and you should go on Facebook and try to sell it for $250.
Exactly. And that's
or $100. And you got to know the difference. And that's not what we're talking about.
Not at all. We've seen the potential. She was doing good work. I watched her do good work with Casey. The dog I'm talking about, I watched her do good work with Casey the winter before. Or I would have never called him. I would have never called Casey and said, "Hey, what are you doing with her?" I knew that she was capable, and I saw when she was here that she was capable. And, but really, a lot of times I think this whole culling conversation comes up because it's fueled by guys that feel like that if they can't cull a dog, they're not a real dog man. They're not a real houndsman if they can't cull a dog. And I think a lot of dogs get culled not for their lack of ability, but because of the lack of the insight on the person that's raising the dog. A lot of times that happens. And that's what gets us in trouble.
It goes both ways because, and I'm a firm believer in culling dogs because I don't care. You can breed the two best dogs in the nation. All those puppies are not all gonna make it. So I hear people saying, I don't cull anything. Like all my dogs turn out. Well, my thinking is if all of your dogs are turning out in your eyes, then you're probably not looking at them good enough.
Agreed.
Because there's going to be some culls in there.
I'm a super strong proponent of the European method,
where they have to be proven.
Well, yeah, but they're known for how do they word it? And it's not strict culling, but they cull, and they're not going to allow dogs. And I've even been chastised for, talking like that. It's like, well, this is America and we got freedom here and all this stuff. It's like, yeah, but not every dog that's walking around on the face of the earth. At some point you're getting into that fur baby mentality that if you think that every dog you're raising is a good prospect or can make it, that's just not the case. It's not the case. You're living in dreamland.
You look at humans. You could have a mom and dad who are upstanding, raise their children right. And I'm not talking about my children, but I've seen it. I just don't want any of them to think I'm talking about them. But so you can have a mom and dad who raise all the kids the same. They have the same upbringing. They got the same breeding. And you just have, one or two that they don't make the mark. I mean, it's the same.
Yeah, but you can't call them, man.
No, you can't call them. I mean, you used to be able to.
Well,
in the Middle Ages, you could. You didn't call them. You just put them out in the woods. So when they had children back then that had birth defects or like learning defects, I mean, you can pick up on that super quick. They didn't kill the children, but they would take that child lots of times and just take them out to the woods and like set them down. It was their version of culling. But what I'm getting at is that you can have the best parent in the world. That does not mean that every pup that comes out of that litter is going to be good. So, I mean, if you're breeding, you have to, just like I say, so with humans, like a child can have a baby can have a learning disability, and the parents will know that in weeks. So we have to get our mindset to that degree with pups, they're not all going to make it.
Well,
and the big thing is
the difference between humans and dogs is that we were put here to have dominion over all this stuff and be caretakers of the animal kingdom in one way or another.
Yeah.
And we have a responsibility to do that. I think it's a moral obligation to do that. But I feel like there's how can I explain this? I think there are dogs that get culled that should not be culled.
For sure.
Because of a lack, it's like, okay, I've been in this 3 or 4 years now, and I hear all these old timers talking about culling dogs that don't work out, but I don't possess the skill set to actually identify and be able to be able to identify the good things in this dog. I don't have the skill set to bring it out. So now I can be cool and talk about I'm a ferocious culler. And I think that can be very damaging. I call less dogs now than I did 25 years ago or 30 years ago.
I would say more good dogs get culled than bad dogs.
I do too. And when I look back at some of the dogs that I did, there's a few that I look at and think, I probably culled because I was frustrated or out of anger instead of my challenging myself and trying to find a way to bring out all those good traits that are genetically there. It was easier for me just to go ahead and cull.
Yeah.
There's been other times I have pretty much limited myself at this age. A litter of puppies, you get genetic defects, they'll never go anywhere. They're going to, they're never even going to raise to weanling age.
You're talking the obvious like physical traits.
Yeah. I mean, I've had stuff that, like heads that weren't closed completely or, just weird, different stuff that
hair lips.
Yeah. You look at them and they're blind, maybe a blind puppy that's like, I'm not going to build a scooter for a dog that was built with no legs,
No.
and take TikTok videos of little Chico pulling himself around with his front legs. It's not happening here.
No. I mean, for a number of years, I raised, and sometimes I say it was wasted years. It wasn't wasted years, but for probably 5 to 7 years, I kind of chased a freak dog. So I bred Airedales to hounds because it wasn't even my dog, but a buddy of mine had a Airedale hound that was, to this day, over the last 25, 30 years. Top 3 hog dogs I've ever been around. So I was trying to duplicate that for a number of years. And so I'd have a litter of pups, and I don't hunt 5 days a week, so I can't take 8 puppies and truly evaluate them and make my pick. So I would keep them up to 3 or 4 months old. I'd pick my 2 or 3 out of that litter that I thought might have it, and then I would usually just give away the others. But the ones that I gave away, I would just give them away to people that I knew that hunted a bunch, but I would always tell them, like, look, for my experience around Airedales, like, they're not beagles, they're not bird dogs. Like, they're not going to really show you what they are till about 1.5 years. So if you take this puppy, like, you're committing, you're going to give this thing to 1.5 years before you even think about culling, because I've had a bunch that I would have culled at 12 months, and then at 15 months, like, you couldn't buy it for $2,000. They're kind of late bloomers. And that kind of goes back to that point, you know.
You just keep bringing up all this stuff that I want to talk about.
What do you want to talk about?
Well, like somebody being willing to wait 1.5 years. I mean, how many times do we see on, I'm telling you, people have gotten conditioned to instant gratification. I've seen great dogs that didn't reach, I'm not even going to say full potential, but potential that was all-star potential, you know, until they were over 1 year old. But you've got all kinds of people that get Facebook experts. It's like, by God, I want an early starting dog. If they ain't treeing their own coon by the time they're 8 months old, I ain't got no use for them. Good for you, man. I hope you find a pile of them, but you're in for a world. It's just such a disappointing thing, because for one thing, a dog that's, and I've had them. I've had the jazz female I talk about so much. People are tired of hearing about her. At 5 months, 7 days old, she treated her own coon by herself in the wild. I started hunting her, and I knew better. I knew better than to do this, but I started hunting the hair off of her. And at 1 year old, she shut down on me. I almost blew her up. I was putting so much pressure on her to do my own thing. I was writing a blog on the UKC forum and doing all this other stuff and giving updates. And I felt the pressure and it wasn't even pressure. It was just like probably ego and just wanting to keep people updated. It was fun. And I remember the night it happened, and it was like, turned her loose. She went out 30 yards. She stopped and she looked at me. I was like, what is she doing? So I got there and grabbed her up, put her back on the leash, cut her again. She goes out 30 yards, stands there and looks at me. And it dawned on me. It's like, you idiot. You know better than this. You've been doing this for 25 years. You've put so much pressure on this dog that you've just taken the fun out of it for her. And so I took her back to the truck, put her up, and that's how I got involved with Big Country. And because she needed a break, I had to lay her up and give her a break. But we get so entrenched and we buy into all this garbage that if you don't have one that's doing that, then you got a call, and you don't necessarily have a call.
I mean, I just come at it from the hog dog world. So in hog dogs, we don't have 300, 400, 500 years of breeding. So yeah, you'll see those beagle puppies that at 2 months old are chasing a drag at full cry and just, you know, it's amazing to watch.
Right.
That's a result of hundreds of years of specific breeding. We don't really have that in hog dogs, but most of the really superb hog dogs that I've witnessed, not that I've owned, that I've witnessed, were late bloomers. And I've seen so many like early bloomers that, like what you're talking about, at 6 months, they're doing amazing shit. You know, at 8 months, it's like, oh my gosh.
How can I be doing this?
And
where can I find one of these?
Yeah. And at a year old, they burn out.
Yep.
And it's kind of, it might be anthropomorphizing, whatever that word is.
Anthropomorphic.
Yeah. We might be putting human traits on these dogs too much. But what I reckon it to is like the 9-year-old girl who's an amazing softball pitcher, and that her parents get her in travel ball, and she's playing 2 nights. She's playing a game 2 nights a week, 4 nights a week. She's at a pitching coach. And then when she hits about 15, she's done with it. It's like she's burned out. Like you pushed her too hard and she shuts down and says, no, like I want my life. And like I say, that could be me just putting too many human properties on a dog. But I honestly, I believe that it compares. I like to let a pup be a puppy. Like I've said in the past, like when I was.
Well, before you get off of that though, I want to bring something up. So I read a study from Purdue University, and they've got a big veterinarian school. And the studies showed that when you don't allow puppies to be puppies, like a puppy knows, we always think puppies, man, they run all over the place. They're always on the move. But they know their bodies tell them when they need to shut down and take a break, because there's no rules, just nature rules at that point. But and this was for performance dogs, that when we push these young dogs too hard and we don't allow their skeletal systems to develop, then we are actually hindering the outcome at the end. So when we push a young dog too hard, like I was, admittedly, then you can't tell me that when you're pushing this young dog and you think they ought to be doing this and you think they ought to be doing that, when they start shutting down, they're not trying to tell you. It's like, hey, I freaking hurt, and then by the time they get to 2 years old, every time you turn them loose, it's like, joints are hurting, spine's hurting, whatever it is. So there's something to that. It's like trying to ride a colt or a mule too young. You got to give them time to let them develop physically before you really start putting the work in. And so I don't think you have to be anthropomorphic about it or try to put human feelings to it at all. There's actually, some again, going back to that scientific stuff, there's actually some data out there that shows that putting too much pressure on them too early will affect the outcome and their ultimate ability to perform. And I think PKC and some of these competition coonhound guys have been, and I've been there too. I've been right there with you guys, thinking I finally decided that I'm not interested in early starters as much as I'm interested in solid finishers.
So basically you're talking from the physical side of it.
Yep.
And I'm talking from the mental side of it.
Yep.
So when my Uncle John come up,
I think the physical side can affect the mental side, though.
Oh, of course. It's all intercombined.
Yeah.
So to relate it back, so like whenever my Uncle John come over to witch my well.
Did you have any other uncles besides John?
I had a bunch. He's my favorite. But when he was witching my well, I had a litter of Catahoula pups on the ground, and my pups just run loose. So I think I had 5 or 6 running loose while we were witching. And we were standing there talking, and I had this pup that I called Plot. because he looked like a Plott dog. He's a straight Catahoula, but he looked like a Plott dog. He was black with brindle legs, brindle trim. And he was chasing a butterfly. And he was baying this butterfly and running around, jumping, trying to catch this butterfly. And John pointed at him and he said, "That's the dog right there. That's the pup you need to keep." And I kept that whole litter, and that dog Plott was the gem out of that litter.
No kidding. That's what I'm talking about seeing those early signs. At that age, how old was that pup at that time?
How old?
Yeah, how old was he, you think he was at that time?
Oh, I mean, I would say probably 2 to 3 months.
Yeah.
He's a pretty young pup.
So that's what I'm talking about, man. You see those glimpses of greatness. You may take him hunting tomorrow or 3 months from now, but something doesn't trip his trigger. But at that point in time, you saw it. And being an experienced dog man, you're like, that's it. That's the natural instinct. We may not have 200 or 300 years of breeding behind us, but those types of behaviors right there is something that I know is in there. And now it's my job to put him in situations to bring it out and expose him to that and bring that characteristic and that genetic makeup to the surface and make a great dog with it. I think that's the cool stuff.
And again, it could come back to that. I didn't see it. I hadn't really evaluated those dogs at that point, but John saw it. So I admired John greatly. So when he pointed that dog out, so then, I noted him, and who knows? I mean, maybe I put more effort into that dog.
Because your favorite uncle identified him.
Yeah. Maybe I made him great because I focused on him. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it kind of goes back to that, like, you got to like the dog,
100%. Let's turn into a pretty cool conversation after talking about throwing turds out the upstairs window in medieval times.
Yeah. I mean, and that's kind of what that's what we're shooting for, is to kind of go for I hate to even say it, but I mean, it's what it is. We're going for a more like Rogan-esque type podcast.
100%.
Where we don't come in saying we're going to talk about this.
I was listening to, I think I sent you a message about this. We were talking about it before, but I was listening to Gad Syed today on the Rogan podcast. And he made the comment of that. He was traveling to Austin to be in this podcast, and somebody asked him, it's like, he was en route, airline, whatever. And somebody's like, "Oh, what are you headed to Austin for?" He's like, "Well, I'm going to be on the Joe Rogan podcast." And they asked him, it's like, do you have like a structured set of topics that you're going to talk about? How's that work? And he's like, "No, it's just exactly the opposite. We've got a kind of one general topic that we're going to talk about, and then we just let the rest of it flow." And that's exactly what human beings do in communication, Yeah,
I mean, we don't have to talk about 100% dogs all the time. So like,
it'd be it's a boring world when you only can talk about one topic.
Yeah. So like, a guy posted on Facebook today, and he was kind of ragging on dog podcast, probably because he's not on any. But, he's like, what do you say? He said, they just ask, how old is your mom, and how long you've been dog hunting. Man, that's not what we do. Me and you have, and that's kind of what we started this, because we have great phone conversations.
Yeah.
Like when you call me, you don't have notes written down about what we're going to talk about. You just call me, and we just talk, and wherever it goes is usually interesting. And that's kind of where we're trying to go with this podcast. Like, yeah, it's probably going to circle back around to dogs, but it doesn't have to. You know, a lot of what we talk about is kind of inferred. And even if we don't even say the word dog, you can kind of infer where it relates back to dogs.
Well, I think for me, Ed, you know, all the things that I pick up, I'm always bouncing off of, wonder how this would apply to dog training. Or I'm looking at dog training type stuff and thinking about how it would apply to just being a better human being. You know, being a dog man, how does that apply to being a better hunter, a better human being, about being a better person? I'm going to tell you right now, man, my wife is like freaking, we call her the dog napper, but she's like a freaking dog whisperer. She gets more out of my Yog Terrier. Just no structure, no. It's weird. Like in the mornings, my dog, I've got a boxer in the house and I've got a pit bull in the house. And then Tough has been introduced to this, my Yog Terrier. And every morning when she gets up and she does a few things, and the dogs are like, it's time to feed us. It's time to feed us. It's time to feed us. Because she's got a routine with them. And she can walk in and she's like, hey, you little beady eyes, you need to get in your kennel. And we got a kennel crate set up in the house. And that dude takes off running for that kennel crate to get in that crate to sit there. And she rewards him every day. I tell her, you don't need to reward him every day, but geez, I'm not going to freaking argue with her. He knows it's like a game to it. He does it with enthusiasm. Whereas when I say, hey, get in your kennel, he's not as enthusiastic about it.
Yeah. It's a command.
It's a command. And she's like, hey, you need to get in your kennel. And he's like, okay. But it's amazing to me that I see the way she interacts with dogs, and I think I need to be more like that. Not everything is, by God, if they tree a possum, I'm going to whip it out of them. You know, it's not all about that. And the more experience and the more I open my mind to other stuff, the better I get with being dog trainer, a hunter, and a human.
Yeah, I mean, you're, you know, as a dog hunter, your mental outlook is probably going to have a bigger impact on those dogs than your like trainer outlook.
Yeah.
So if you don't trust your, you know, it's kind of old at this point. It's probably years old, but there was a video that kind of went viral years ago, and it was this little kind of hillbilly kid, and he had beagles. Have you seen it?
I don't think I have.
And he was out in the woods with his beagles, and they jumped a rabbit and ran it, and he shot it, and then he kind of gave this like commentary. His mom was filming.
Oh yeah. He's a small kid.
Yeah, a little kid.
Yeah.
He's probably like 9.
Right.
And he gave this commentary after his beagles had got this rabbit. And he said, and I don't remember it exactly. It's just verbatim. But he said, you got to trust your dogs. You know, if you trust your dogs, you know, they'll do right. And I really took that to heart because I was kind of having a problem with it at the time. Like I would turn my dogs loose and I'd be with other dudes, you know, and my dogs would strike and they'd look at me and I'd be like, you know, I don't know. They might be running a deer.
Yeah.
And there's something really deep to that. Like, you got to trust your dogs. Like, that doesn't mean you turn a blind eye to, the obvious signals that are coming in, but have faith in your dogs. And, they feed off of our emotions when we turn them loose.
Yeah, there's a couple things that brings to mind is one of the biggest hurdles for a police canine handler is realizing that he's the weak link in the chain.
Yeah.
When you're running a track on a human being, the instructors are constantly tell you, trust the dog, trust the dog, trust the dog. And when I was a new handler, that was very hard for me because I'm a human. I'm the human here. I'm the one that's supposed to be in control. I'm the one that has got this level of higher thinking. And so I struggled as a new handler to be able to relinquish the control to this freaking dog. It's like, no, I know where this track's, even on known tracks, it's like, but you got to learn that patience. You got to learn and build that trust and let go of your own ego and trust that the dog's going to take you where it needs to go.
Yeah. And for quite a few years, when I first started hog hunting, we ran pretty close range dogs. So they were usually within like a maximum of 500 yards from us.
Mm-hmm.
So you had a little bit better inclination to what they were doing. They were close enough to shock them or holler at them and kind of control them that way. And then we got to a point where we started running long range dogs, where they might be a mile from you, 2 miles from you. And for a good amount of time, like, that was super stressful. And I look back at it now and I'm like, oh yeah, it's because we were kind of like, when we started running dogs that were 2 miles from us, we were kind of like relinquishing that control.
Exactly.
We had to trust that our dogs were doing right. And it's kind of a tough hurdle to get over.
Yeah. 100%.
But I was at it's been years ago, but I was at a gas station getting ready to go hunting, and I was pumping gas, and a cop with the canine dog pulled up, pumped next to me, right across from me. And he was pumping his gas, and this shepherd dog was in his back seat just going crazy. I mean, just barking like nonstop, like uncontrollable. And the cop kept yelling at him. It didn't have any effect on him. The dog just kept going crazy. Now I'm pumping my gas, and the cop stuck his head across the pump, and he said, "What's that dog barking at?" Like in a accusatory tone.
Yeah.
And I was like, he ain't barking at nothing wrong going over here. I was like, I don't think you can control that dog. And then he started, really putting some volume to his voice, trying to get this dog to shut up. He couldn't control that dog. And like I said, there was nothing on my side of the pump.
I'm going to tell you, man, some of the, I saw some guys handle, how do I want to say this? We say it's unfiltered, but
Just say it.
I'm just trying to think of the most intelligent way to explain this. I got called one time. I was a canine handler for a few years, and the local sheriff's department had a guy that wanted to be a handler. He'd been after him, and this deputy he was a subpar police officer to begin with, and he was lazy. And the chief deputy's calling me. He's like, what do you think about so-and-so being a canine handler? I said, is he a productive officer now? He's like, no, not really. I said, well, if he's a lazy cop now, he's going to be a lazy handler too. And you're going to have a subpar dog. So you're just going to have the extra expense. But
man, I've watched
9 times out of 10, when you get a dog that, and a handler that the handler, if you got a lazy handler, you're going to have a subpar dog. That's just all there is to it. There's no wishy-washy about it. There's, and then you get into liability issues, and you get into, I saw a video with the handler, and I'm not just, it's hard for me to talk about this stuff without being disparaging, but there's a female officer, and I'm sure this dog at home was her fur baby and all this other bullshit. And this dog wouldn't engage a target, just flat wouldn't engage. And then she was like, it was a mess. It was an absolute train wreck. She had no control over the dog. The dog was a liability, and it was totally handler induced.
Man, this is Raw Dog, so I'll just say it. Like, I've seen plenty of them shows where they bring out the canine and they walk the dog around the vehicle, and I'm like, focus on the dog.
Yep.
And they're like, the dog signal. What was the damn signal? Like, I didn't see a damn thing.
Well, Ed, you're not a trained handler.
I 100% believe that whole like canine dog thing is just BS. And they're like, oh, he signaled that there was dope in the truck, so we're going to search.
Not with a good canine.
I mean, there's good ones. There's good ones.
But I can also, and Heath will tell you, Heath Hyatt has talked about this when he was doing podcasts for us. You can talk a dog into giving you the response that you're looking for. If a perfect example, our dogs were all trained on tracking, detection work, and evidence recovery. Well, if you condition that dog that when you tap and you continue to hide stuff under the gas cap, a bag of dope under the gas cap, and he gets rewarded every time he passes that gas cap, he's going to figure out that when I either give you an active indication by scratching, which you don't want on a car, or he sits, he's going to get rewarded. He's going to pass that. Dogs are freaking smart like that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think that the dog is kind of so I get pulled over, and the cop says, "Can I search your car?" And I say, "No."
Good for you.
And he says, "Well, we're going to bring a canine out."
Bring it. So then they just bring a dog out, and the dog does nothing. And then the cop says, he signaled on your passenger side door. That's a human. That's not away from the dog stuff. That's on the officers.
Yeah, that's all I'm saying. They're just using it. They're just using it as a means of probable cause. And not all, because there are some amazing police dogs out there. But I think a lot of these departments just get a dog, and then they can just say, "Oh, we got probable cause from the dog because he signaled on the passenger side rear door." Well, what was the signal? Because I didn't see it,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's BS. I think it's just a tool for them to get.
It can be. It's just like anything else. It can be government, it can be abuse. But 9 times out of 10, the officers that are willing to do that, it's just an excuse. You can train a dog better than that. We would go to tracking seminars and that's what we did, man. Tracking people. That's what we did. That's what we were good at. And we tracked people. But you would go to these canine seminars, and you could always tell the officers that doing bite work is easy. I mean, it's easy. You have a decoy stand out there with a juice sleeve, turn your dog loose, and as long as he breaks command or can sit, it takes no physical effort on your part at all. But you start running tracks up and down these hills and 3 or 4, You better not be a lazy ass and think you're going to be successful doing that, because you got track with that dog on the leash, and it's hard. And detection work and bite work is easy. When you start doing tracking work, then that takes some time. And when people are too lazy to even do the detection work right, you're going to have you got a liability and a mess on your hands.
It's like here in Oklahoma. I don't know how it is in Indiana. In Oklahoma, a game warden doesn't have to have a search warrant to search your house.
Bull crap.
Not in Oklahoma.
Bull crap.
No,
that's bullshit.
Honestly,
the Fourth Amendment cannot be violated. Violated.
But it is violated.
Well, it's not supposed to be.
There's a bunch of states. It's not just Oklahoma. There's a bunch of states. So, like, we had a bill come up in Oklahoma, I think 3 years ago, trying to take that away from the game wardens, which, of course, we pushed it really hard, but we lost. So then what I'm getting at is the same as the dog. So in Oklahoma, what they'll do, so they'll set up, Memorial Day weekend, 4th of July weekend, when there's a lot of people drinking and driving. Our local cops and our sheriffs will set up roadblocks. We know where they're going to be, but they'll set up roadblocks. So when they set up roadblocks now, they have a game warden come out, because a game warden can search your car with no probable cause. And
they're that is a clear violation of the Fourth Amendment. The state can set laws that are less stringent than the U.S. Constitution, or no, more stringent than the U.S. Constitution, but they can't make anything that's less stringent.
Oh, it's a total violation, but I'm telling you, it goes on constantly here.
Well, here's the problem. And we just dropped a podcast on Houndsman XP called Green Jeans Exposed, and I talked about all of this stuff. The problem is you get a lot of this coffee shop, coon club conversation going on, where it's like, well, game wardens can search your house or your truck without probable cause. No, we can't. You cannot do it. It's absolutely 100% illegal. But if the general population feels like that's the case, then we're going to, the game wardens and law enforcement are going to use that to their advantage. The Supreme Court has ruled that a reasonable amount of trickery and deceit is totally acceptable in order to make a criminal case. So if I can stand there and say, in my game warden outfit, standing there and saying, well, Ed, and I asked the question like this. I was like, Ed, have you ever heard that game wardens can search your car without your consent? And he's like, yeah. It's like, well, do you want to be the guy to test that theory? Like, no. Okay. Well, let me search your car. Okay. Most people are compliant.
It comes back to, do you have enough money?
Sometimes it does, but sometimes it just comes back to, do you have the awareness to challenge that and say, no, I don't think you can, because the U.S. Constitution says that you cannot. And the U.S. Supreme Court has upheld that you cannot.
If a game warden showed up at my door right now and said, I'm going to check your freezer, I would say, do you have a search warrant?
You should. And if he says no.
And he would say, no, but I don't need one. And I would say, well, if you don't have one, you ain't coming in. And he'd say, well, I'm coming in. We can do it. And he does, and he checks my freezer, and I got 3 deer in there. And then he pulls up my breaker and says, you haven't tagged a deer in. Yeah, I could beat him if I've got enough money to go to court 10 times. But do I have that much money? I probably don't. I mean, I'm telling you, they do it in Oklahoma. Game warden can come on your private property. All he has to do is say that
coming on your private property is not the same as entering your house.
I'm telling you, in Oklahoma, they can enter your house without a search warrant. And in Oklahoma, is it because of the reservation Indian, Cherokee Nation status or what? I don't think it has anything to do with Indians, because they do it in a few states. The reason why it popped into my head is because I saw on Facebook last week, and I don't remember which state it was, but there was some state in the South that passed a law like we were trying to pass like maybe 3 years ago, saying they couldn't do that. I don't remember where it was. Let's just say Kentucky. But
Tennessee.
Was it Tennessee?
Yeah, Tennessee. Yeah, I was actually talking to T.L. Jones this past week, and he was telling me about a bill that recently passed. See, the problem is, like Indiana used to have a law that said conservation officers can search receptacles that may contain wildlife with or without a warrant. And that included coolers, boats, freezers. any place that you can contain that. But it was never widely accepted. If I was working and I came to your house and I could gain consent from you to search your freezer, I knew that you probably had a deer in there and I could gain consent to search that, I haven't violated your rights as long as I've gained consent.
Yeah, not if I give it to you.
Yeah.
But see, I would never give it. And I could be wrong, but I think in Oklahoma, I don't even have to give consent to a game warden.
Then they're operating totally outside of the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution.
Not on the same level that I would have to give a general law enforcement.
Game wardens, conservation officer, conservation police officers, environmental, whatever you want to call them, game wardens are law enforcement that have to operate within the same confines of the U.S. Constitution and all Supreme Court rulings that apply. Now, you mentioned entering. Why do we always end up on this? I just did a whole freaking podcast about this, and it's a big topic. It is. It is a big topic, and I'm actually going to have. I'm not even going to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm not even going to bring it out. But I think people need to tune into the Houndsman XP podcast about the month of July and just watch what we're going to do, because I think it's important. It's important for us to know, and this sounds really strange coming from me, and I think there's a lot of people out there, and I think Brett Vaughn probably thinks I'm still an active game warden and working undercover or something. But
you are.
Yeah, for sure. But conservation officers a lot of times don't even understand what they're allowed to do and what they're not allowed to do. But just like anything else, whatever job you're in, if you can find an easier way to print a magazine or whatever you got to do, then you're going to use that to your advantage. And with being a game warden, that involves, I knew 100%, like if I came to Ed Barnes' house and you're like, you're not coming in my house without a warrant, then it's like, okay, this guy knows something. But if I come to your house and say, hey, I've got information, this is going to go a lot easier if you just let me do it. If I've got to go, and I told people this, if I've got to go get a warrant and we've got to go through all this, if you want to stick to the law, the way the law is written, then you committed.
Constitution.
Yeah. Then we will stick to that. We will do that. And if I come back here with a warrant and find illegal deer in your house or illegal game, whatever it was, then I'm going to follow the law. And the law says that I can jail you for that offense. Or you can give me consent to search. And if I find something, I'll write you a ticket. I'll seize the deer. I'll see you in court. I did that.
Yeah. And for the, I'll be the devil's advocate for anybody out there who might be on the left side of the law a little bit. If you're going to put something in a freezer that is questionable, put it in your house. Because if you put it in a freezer in your barn, it's kind of a gray area, because that Fourth Amendment comes back to your domicile.
Exactly.
Your house.
You're one of the few people I've ever talked to that understood that.
So, yeah, not to like add legitimacy to being an outlaw, but if you're going to do it, put it inside the actual house that you live in, not, like I say, not like in a freezer you have in your barn or whatever, because it's kind of a gray area, because the Fourth Amendment is clear. They can't search your house.
The right of the people to be secure in their persons, places, houses, papers, houses, and effects shall not be infringed except upon probable cause and a warrant issued by the courts based on probable cause. That's but not the exact wording, but that's pretty damn close.
But like your barn is a little bit of a gray area.
Well, there's actually Supreme Court rulings based on whether your barn is covered under the Fourth Amendment or not. You mentioned about entering private property. That's been under fire here lately. And that's the law that Tennessee just passed, because they can be more strict than the U.S. Constitution or courts. And it says that unless, and I haven't read the law, this is what I was told from a reliable source, that they can't enter your private property without probable cause, which that department is capable of mandating that to their officers. You need to make sure you have probable cause before you enter any private property. But the U.S. Supreme Court and all kinds of judicial districts all across the country have upheld that a law enforcement officer can enter property when he has reasonable suspicion, which that threshold is lower. I've just got to have a preponderance of the evidence that there is a crime being committed on that property. And then I'm covered by what's called the open fields doctrine, which allows me to go into property that is not considered curtilage, the maintained area immediately around the house, basically your yard. Yeah. So if your barn, like where I'm at, it would be a tough sell, because my house sits here. I've got a few outbuildings here, and my barn's just like right across the driveway from my house. So it'd be a tough sell. It'd be tough for me as a law enforcement officer to go into that barn and search for anything. Now, if the door's open and Bambi's hanging there from the gambrel, now it's plain view. And that's a whole different deal there.
Totally different deal.
Yep, totally different deal. But you're not necessarily covered just because it's private property in your state. A law enforcement officer can enter areas of your property without a warrant that's not considered curtilage.
Yeah, you have a lot more rights in the building that you sleep in.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what they established the castle doctrine for. Once somebody crosses that threshold, and they're there without your consent, you have the right to defend that castle up to and including deadly force.
And that goes back to, like we were talking about medieval times in Europe. Back in those days, the army could just come into your house but we're fighting a war.
That was colonial America.
Yeah.
That's why it was written.
Yeah. We need all your food.
Yep.
To feed these soldiers.
You had to make available a room and board to British soldiers in colonial America. And that's why our founding fathers were like, screw that. Let's write the Fourth Amendment.
Yeah, they were like, your home is your castle, and it's yours, and you don't have to give it up to anybody.
Yep.
Yeah, that's where that comes from.
100%.
But yeah, I mean, 100%. If a game warden, like I say, if a game warden showed up right now and said, I'm coming in there to check your freezer, I'd say no. You know, I would adamantly say no. And he probably still would come in. And not that it's a given, but he might check my freezer and find some deer in there that I didn't have tags for. And yeah, I could go to court and fight that if I had enough money to hire a lawyer and beat it. But do I have enough money to beat it? Probably not.
There's plenty of people out there. There's plenty of attorneys out there that would take that case on a pro bono, or, you know, to be able to say that they set jurisprudence and set a precedence in the court to make a name for themselves.
I don't know. Like I say, in Oklahoma, it's kind of a given that a game warden can do that. I mean, I'm not making it up. When the sheriffs have a roadblock, they bring a game warden in because he can search your car with no probable cause.
They're violating people's Fourth Amendment rights when they do that.
The Constitution is the ultimate rule of law. But like I say, it comes back to
law stands until it's challenged. That's really what it boils down to, is when it's challenged, that's when you test the law. And as long as it's never tested, then government's going to take all of the liberties that it possibly can to accomplish its goal.
You know, we fought that in Oklahoma. It's probably been, at this point, it's probably been 10 years ago. So it's illegal to bring pigs across state line without going through a ag checkpoint. So a number of years ago, they used to have this hog hunting tournament down in Texas it was a live tournament. So all the pigs were alive. So they would do I guess you call it like an auction. So before the tournament, they would have hog buyers come in with a tournament and say, we'll give 40 cents a pound on the hoof, 50 cents a pound. And then a hog buyer would win the bid.
Mm-hmm.
So they would buy all the hogs that were caught in this tournament. So there was this old dude in Oklahoma, and he would always bid on this auction. Well, he would bring them, and he won it for quite a few years, the bid. So he would buy these hogs in Texas. He would drive them through Oklahoma. He didn't even stop them in Oklahoma. He would take them to Kansas. It's either Kansas or Missouri, I can't remember. And there was a buyer there that would then buy these hogs from him to butcher. So Oklahoma passed a law, like it's been probably 10 years ago, where they were putting regulations on transporting wild hogs and blah blah blah. So this old man, and he was up in his 80s, so they had just passed this law. So he calls Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Department of Agriculture is over wild hogs because they don't want to call them wild. And they just passed this law. So he calls Dr. Roach at Oklahoma City and says, hey, I'm bidding on these hogs down here. Am I going to have any problems if I win? Because I'm going to be driving them through Oklahoma, going to Missouri or whichever state it was. Dr. Roach says, oh, no, you won't have any problem. As long as you don't unload them in Oklahoma, you won't have any problems. So he wins the bid. And he had 3 stock trailers full of wild hogs that he bought in Texas. He was leading the caravan, and he told me, he said, Ed, when I crossed the Red River, he said there were cops lined up on the road. He said, as soon as I crossed the road, they all pulled in, lit me up, and like I say, he was in his 80s. They handcuffed him, confiscated all 3 trailers, took him to the courthouse, had him handcuffed to a chair for like 12 hours. And he ended up beating it, but he said come to find out, this Dr. Roach, who's head of the agriculture department in Oklahoma City, his son-in-law was bidding against this guy to buy these pigs. The dude's name was Cooper, who won the bid. And he said, they had me handcuffed to a chair for like 12 hours. He said, they brought the DA in, and he's like, I told the DA. Cooper had a bunch of money. He was an old man, an old farmer, but, you know, like them old farmers, he had a shit ton of money. Yeah. Probably in mason jars.
That's what I was going to say, buried in jars.
Yeah. And he said, I told that lady, he said, charge me with whatever you want. He said, I will fight you till my death and use my every last dollar to beat you. And it's kind of the same thing you're talking about. Like, so there's the law and there's what they can get away with. They figured out pretty quick with Sammy Cooper that they weren't going to win. Like, he was going to fight him.
Yeah, they got DA's going to figure out whether the juice is worth the squeeze or not.
Yeah, and they finally figured it out. It cost Sammy quite a bit of money, but he finally beat him. But he was an old outlaw, dude. He was cool as shit. Like, he would catch wild hogs. He was smart enough. Sammy was smart enough that, okay, so when I was talking to Brett and them a few weeks ago or last week, we was talking about the open range. Well, when the range closed, people started selling their range rights. And I mean, it was like stupid cheap, you know, like you could buy.
Yeah, it's over. We might as well unload it while we can.
Yeah, you could sell 2,000 acres of range rights for $20.
Yeah.
And Sammy was old. Like I said, he was an old rancher, and a lot of them old ranchers have money. So he started buying all the range rights. This is southern Oklahoma. So he bought up, I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of range rights. So, you know, they started passing all these laws. Well, he'd be driving home from a hog hunt and have 3 wild hogs tied on the back of his flatbed and get pulled over. And they try to get him with transporting wild hogs and whatever. And he's like, feral hogs, I should say.
Right.
And he said, those aren't feral hogs. Those are my hogs. And like I was saying, like, they can't pull blood and tell a do-rock from a woods hog.
Yeah.
So he kind of beat him for years and years and years. And he beat him in the end. It cost him quite a few bucks, but he got him. But I mean, there's the law and there's the law that you have enough money to fight.
Sure. Yeah. I'm just wondering why, you know, somebody hadn't contacted John Stossel and done an investigative reporting deal in Oklahoma about rights being abused. I think you guys could get that fired up pretty easy.
Man, I think it's in quite a few states. I don't think we're the only one. I mean, if Tennessee just passed that law, that means they were right where we were at before they passed that law.
Well, Tennessee passed it. Tennessee passed it to say that, yes, the U.S. Constitution is up here, but our citizens are going to be protected by this right. So actually the threshold was lower for the U.S. Constitution, and Tennessee stepped it up. Like I said, I haven't read the law, but Tennessee's legislators went above that and said, the lower threshold is what the Constitution says, but in Tennessee, this is what we're going to say. We can set laws that meet a higher threshold at this point.
So let's say that it's deer season.
Because ultimately, the state of Tennessee controls how their officers conduct business. The U.S. Constitution doesn't. So they can't say, screw the Constitution, you guys can do whatever you want. What they were saying was the Constitution says this, we're taking a step above and saying, the U.S. Constitution may say this, but we are saying this. You're not going to enter this private property.
So in Oklahoma, let's say it's deer season and I'm hunting on my own property and I don't have a deer license. And
are you required to have one on your own property in Oklahoma?
Yeah.
Wow.
So let's say I shoot a deer, and then when I shoot that deer and start walking up to it, some game warden pops up. He's obviously been on my private property.
Yep.
And then he's going to write me a ticket for shooting this deer with no tag. In Oklahoma, that's totally legal. Where he can just say, well, I heard shots coming from his property.
Mm-hmm.
So I slipped on there to see what was going on.
Right. Well, it's a totality of the circumstances. If I'm driving around on the opening weekend of deer season and I hear two shots that are indicative of somebody that's deer hunting, and I walk in there to see what's going on, then boom, it's a totally legal check according to the open fields doctrine under court rulings and different stuff like that.
But does that jive with the Constitution?
Yeah. Yep. It's been found by the U.S. Supreme Court and several federal district courts that's totally legal for law enforcement to do. Now, if you get that deer back to your house and the officer heard shots on your property and he walks to your door and says, hey, I heard some shots on your property and I think you have that deer in your house. It's like
different thing.
Too bad. You got a warrant.
Let's take a break again. I got to pee.
Why don't we just wrap it?
Okay, let me pee first. I'm going to pop.
All right.
You do know we're never going to get away from this like game warden side of it.
Oh yeah, that's funny you bring that up because I actually spent a little bit of brain power on that. When we started the Houndsman XP podcast, it was to be able to give a voice and build narrative and stuff like that. And then I find out that so many people, they actually want to talk about this stuff. They actually want to have a conversation with somebody that'll be real with them and tell them exactly like, hey, this should be, every one of us is an American citizen, and we have a right to have the expectation that we can exercise our constitutional rights. And I have no problem talking about that because you said it a few weeks ago in another raw dog or conversation we had, that we're held to a higher standard. Yeah, we are. We've got the U.S. Constitution that we've got to adhere to. And I feel like that it's our duty and obligation, if we're going to be servants of the people. I took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States. And so now that's saying that I'm obligated to operate within those confines. It doesn't mean that if I can gain consent from you where I don't have to go fill out whole report and a probable cause affidavit and go to a judge and get a warrant and all that stuff. If I can do that, if I can get in your house without doing that, that doesn't mean that I'm not going to take advantage of that, you know? But I can tell you this, that all of the big serious cases, I mean, the cases that you hang your hat on, when I come to your door, that work's already been done. You know, seriously. I mean, I've already done all that. I've got the warrant in my hand. You don't know I'm coming. And when I got that warrant in my hand, then boom, you know, now I've satisfied the whole Constitution. So a lot of times, a lot of this stuff where guys have these horror stories about dealing with game wardens, a lot of it is if I know that you don't know your rights and I can get that consent without having to jump through all the legal hoops, then that's what leaves a bad taste in people's mouth. But the good cases that I've worked over the years, man, you had no clue I was coming. I go to the door, knock, 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 conservation officer, search warrant, come to the door. You don't come to the door. At that point, I can kick your door in. You know, it's always better. You want to gain compliance and you want to do it. But even when I had a warrant in my pocket, a lot of times, and that's when you've got the sheriff's department and 3 other conservation officers with you that are going to do a thorough search of your property. But if I can go to your door and say, hey, Ed, I got this feeling that you got a deer in there. Can I search your property? I don't want to cause them a bunch of problems. Let's just do this the easy way. And you say yes, and you give me consent, I'm home free. I'll never have a defense attorney challenge me on the constitutionality of my warrant at that point, because that's the first thing a defense attorney is going to challenge is the validity of that warrant. Did I really have probable cause? Let's look at that. How did you get your probable cause? All that stuff. But if I can get Ed to say, yeah, just come on in, hurry up, get out of here. My kids are ready to go to bed. I got to get up early for work. Let's get this taken care of.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm in and out, baby. Show me where it's at. The deer is back there in the freezer. Thank you for being the dumbest criminal of the week. You know,
and that brings up something else that we've dealt with a lot here in Oklahoma. I don't know about other states, but so a sheriff shows up at your house with the local HSUS dog pound.
We need to save this.
Yeah, I mean it's a totally different subject. We'll just hit on it here for a second.
All right.
So yeah, this will be
because I've dealt with some of this too.
Yeah, this will be another big podcast. But so when the sheriff shows up at your house with some private entity that identifies with some animal rescue, whatever, you do not have to give consent for them to enter your property. A lot of people will give consent, you know, either outright or implied, and then they can come in, confiscate your dogs because you got some green algae in your water bucket or there's 6 turds in your dog kennel. Everyone should know their rights, and they kind of use those groups kind of in the same way that I'm getting at that Oklahoma law enforcement will use a game warden.
Well, there's a couple things to say about that. One is the National Sheriff's Association endorses the HSUS because they end up getting funding from the HSUS to investigate animal cruelty cases. The HSUS provides the training. ASPCA does the same thing. They provide the training, the money, all of that sort of stuff, and the grant work. And sheriffs, chiefs of police, mayors are all about how can we get more funds in to fund our police force, and so that's how they end up doing the bidding on that sort of stuff. I have never ever seen. And we just, as conservation officers, we just absolutely refused to be involved in any of that stuff. The other side of it is a lot of times people will see the HSUS person with the sheriff's department and automatically think that they have some sort, or ASPCA, whoever it is, and they automatically think because they're accompanying that law enforcement officer that they have the authority to be there. No, they don't. They're a private citizen. All right, Sheriff, this conversation is between me and you. That person over there wearing the dungarees with the rainbow colored hair, driving the Subaru, they need to get their ass off my property and stay at the road.
Yeah.
And you have that ability to do that.
Yeah, let's save that for another podcast because that's a whole nother. We can talk for 2 hours on that. Yep,
for sure.
But people need to know their rights, and like I say, we'll get back to that maybe next time.
100%. Everybody should know their rights and know how they can exercise those rights. And the system is actually set up where you can do that peacefully without, you might be able to retire early if you know your rights.
Yeah. And those rights are there for a reason. I mean, that's what makes us American.
That's exactly right.
You're not being a jerk when you tell that game warden, no, you can't come in my house without a warrant,
Right.
Or tell that ASPCA person, no, you don't have the right to look at my dogs.
Nope.
Come back with a warrant.
That's right. All right. Well, let's wrap up this episode of the Raw Dog Podcast. I don't know how long we've been going. It doesn't matter how long we've been going because it's been good conversation, non-scripted. Thanks, Ed. Take it easy, buddy.
Okay. We'll see you.